Sorry. Got the mic, so I'll speak. Guys, I just wanted to ask you guys about your involvement in sports, and particularly about the fact that a lot of times sports brings about rivalries between two different groups that have differences. So for example, if you look at the Invictus movie, it was South Africa and a whole country behind that, behind the Springboks. But for example, if there were two teams, one black, one white, and you're trying to use sport to bring them together, it would be much more of a difficult task to do. And I think that's kind of similar to what your organizations do. And I wanted to ask if you guys have experienced that as a problem, and what you do to work around that.
I know that PeacePlayers does a really great job. They have a really nice process set up. I've got to hear a little bit about it. The way we will work, there's 3 communities we're working with, and we'll start sports leagues in each specific community with local leaders who understand the principles and everything that the program has to offer. And very slowly, and when they're ready, we'll start intermixing the groups very slowly. So eventually it will be inter-community. That's the goal, but it also has to be when they're ready. You can't force it. You can't say in 6 months you have to be there or this is a failure. It's not the case at all. It's very much a process. You have to be flexible, and you have to be willing to adjust as your schedule needs, and as sponsors want you, if they want to see results, then that's not reality. It's all about relationships and waiting for the right timing. So initially, the sports leagues will begin, which will obviously focus on peace components, and then when they feel they're ready and when everyone as a whole feels ready, we'll start intermixing. So that's kind of how we troubleshoot that a little bit. And they do something quite similar.
Yeah, it's very similar. I'm sure some of the people in this room are familiar with Belfast. There are 2 schools there called Holy Cross and WIP. And I'm just going to share a little story of what we did with them that speaks to your question a little bit. Back in 2007, I think, it might have been 2006, we started programs in each of these 2 schools that were just based in those schools. So we just had PeacePlayers staff there teaching these kids basketball. Nobody in Belfast knows how to play basketball. Not nobody, but very few. Yeah. It's far down the totem pole of sports there. But we would just send people into these schools to help the kids have a great time, some phys ed style classes, and based on that, over a slow process, we brought them together in an integrated context. So first it was one event, then it was a couple events a year. And just this year, we actually started bringing them together on a regular basis. I have to double check, but I believe they come together once a week. And that wouldn't have been possible the first day, because as Jesse said, the kids aren't ready for it, the parents aren't ready for it, the principals aren't ready for it. It's a risky thing. Yeah. So it is a slow process, and that's always a real threat. And it's something that any organization needs to keep in mind.
I feel like you say there how the basketball, you mentioned as a sport that didn't really have a grounding in Northern Ireland. Do you think that's a very important aspect, in that if you bring a sport that already has historical baggage and problems with it, so in a way you think the choice of sport is almost as important as the most important part of the process? Or?
Absolutely, I think it's very important. That's one of the reasons why we do use basketball. Because we started in South Africa and Northern Ireland, in both of those places, basketball is not a game that's affiliated with one or the other community. If it's seen as anything, it's seen as an American game. But more often than not, it's not really seen. So it did give us a unique space to enter that field. At the same time, there are drawbacks to that. We have to work a little bit harder to recruit our participants because they all want to play Gaelic or football or whatever the case may be. So it does have its challenges, but it certainly does open up new avenues. And that's where you get for context.
And is that the same in the DRC? Is soccer, had it been there already, or was it?
Yes, soccer had been there already, and it wasn't as controversial as it is in some places. And we had to look at it as far as what resources were available. And actually, passion for a specific sport was a resource that we needed to utilize. We don't have competition between other recreational activities because there actually are none. And so these kids already are passionate about soccer, so it was a good fit for us. where it's in a different context, probably within coastal work. So.
Yeah.
Any further questions? So who's good at the back there, Connor?
Oh, sorry. Right. My question is mainly directed towards Brian, because I'm actually familiar with the PeacePlayers International. A couple of guys down my street got involved with it. I grew up swimming, so that was considered a very neutral sport. You know, we had kids showing up in GA t-shirts, Rangers tops, but when we got into the pool, we didn't talk about it, and we just went and swam. Like, what I'm trying to understand here is that when you bring, is the core aim of your program just to bring people together, or is it to kind of raise awareness of the differences? Because I think it's two different things. I mean, I made a lot of Catholic friends while I was swimming, but we never talked about what was actually, what was going on in society. It was a completely different thing. Is there kind of like an education curriculum alongside of playing sport, or is it just, right, we'll break down that first barrier and hopefully they'll have conversations by themselves about it?
Yeah, that's also a very good question, and that's actually something we had to learn. So when we first started, it was just about that first moment. It was just about familiarizing different sides with each other. Sorry, microphone here. Is that any better? So at first it was that. What we learned is that there you go. What we learned is that that's not necessarily going to create the kind of long-lasting change that these communities are looking for. So now we do have really directed discussions as part of all our programs about, in Northern Ireland, sectarian differences. In the Middle East, it's a little bit different. I should backtrack a minute there. So we work in 4 different countries. In each place, the context is a little bit different. In Northern Ireland, obviously, 10 years past the Good Friday Agreement, not that there's still any tensions there. In Israel and the West Bank, it's a very different atmosphere where tensions are still a lot more on people's minds. So you can do certain things in one place that you can't do in another place. In Northern Ireland, we do absolutely have discussions about sectarianism. We were recently involved in an event called Up Against the Wall that was talking about the peace walls in Belfast and children's reaction to it and things that they thought they could do, their communities could do to get around those barriers. In the Middle East, we don't do that. In the Middle East, we do something a little bit different. It's still education, it's still dialogue, but there it's more about personal leadership. It's more about teaching children a way to resolve conflicts and transform conflicts in their own lives. So the short answer is you're right. You're right in that contact is very different than education and very different than true cooperation, and that's something that we've learned. The longer answer is that even after that question, there are a lot of other really complicated and really interesting questions about where you go next, about what that extra value add